So the process to register a trademark actually varies to some extent depending on which country we're talking about. But focusing on the United States, the process usually starts by submitting an application. So you disclose whatever it is that you want to register as a trademark. So maybe that's a word mark, maybe that's a slogan, could be a logo, could be a service mark. Depending on what you're actually planning to do under the mark, that's the most important thing to figure out first. The second thing to disclose to the USPTO in this application is exactly what you plan to do. So perhaps you're selling clothing. That clearly will fall in Class 25. You need to identify the particular types of clothing that you plan to sell. If you have a retail store that sells clothing, perhaps that falls in Class 35 and you protect it, whether it's a virtual website or your traditional brick and mortar. But the process is relatively straightforward to get to that point. You submit the trademark application to the USPTO, you pay the fees to make sure that the application is submitted correctly, and then you wait. You effectively have to wait on the USPTO to make a decision about whether or not your trademark is registrable. And there are a few different factors that determine whether or not it's registrable, but the primary one to keep in mind is that trademark rights are based on first use in commerce. So if somebody else filed your mark 3 months before you did, if they got in line ahead of you at the USPTO, that person, at least in theory, has a good jump on whether or not that trademark is something they can register, and therefore they can preclude you from registering, again, because they were first in time and first in right. But presuming that things go well, presuming that there isn't anybody blocking you at the USPTO, if the examiner comes back and they issue what's called a notice of allowance, you effectively are teed up to be able to use the Circle R once the entire set of paperwork is finished up. So you have to come along later. Again, trademark rights are based on use in commerce, so if you haven't already been using it, if you didn't submit proof of your use on the front end, you have to submit that on the back end, and you have to show exactly how you started using the mark. You have to provide evidence that's called a specimen to say, here is an example of the way that I use my mark in commerce. And once that all is submitted, everything gets finalized and you can finally put the Circle R on the end of your trademark.
Protect your brand with Trademarkia. Register your trademark on Trademarkia.com.